Okay, it's been about 24 hours. How are you feeling about the scrimmage now, taking away your visceral reaction from yesterday?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn, and we will talk about LinkedIn in just a bit. Jimmy, let's have some more scrimmage reaction. It says it right there on this little thing that I wrote so eloquently. So we've had roughly 24 hours to digest yesterday. Initially, I have no problem saying, initially I was a little bummed. I felt like the reports all seem negative. Again, we want to stress there wasn't a huge amount of people there. We're getting this from either secondhand reports or from online reports or people we know, whatever. And the reports have been varying all over the board, especially when it comes to quarterback. And that's where I think we'll start because everybody's still, yesterday, our podcast, we had tons of comments about the quarterbacks. And some people are like, hey, it's obvious it's Jalen Milroe. Other people are like, oh my God, if it's Milroe, we're in trouble. Other people are like, it's Simpson. Oh my God, did you not see Simpson do blank and so terribly? Oh my God, what about Buckner? A lot of people saying, oh my God, apparently. But, and I've even had a couple of people message me that, man, I still think it could be Lonergan. Look, I think in the end, let's all just accept we don't know who it is yet, but I feel very confident at this point it's going to be Milroe. I am here for it. I'm excited to be able to watch his maturity through this year. I'm ready for it to be settled, Jimmy, because, again, as we mentioned on yesterday's podcast, Carson Beck was just named the starter at Georgia. Peyton Thorne was just named the starter at Auburn. We don't need to run our program like they run their programs. I understand that. But my point is it feels weird still having this relatively unsettled at this point, and I'm ready to move forward with it. And I think it's going to be Milroe, and I'm here for it. I'm happy.
Yeah, I think just because Coach Saban hasn't publicly named a starter doesn't mean it's not settled. I mean, again, you might be getting tired of me saying this, but look at, when Bryce was hurt last year, it was Milroe. Spring practice started, it was Milroe. A-Day, it was Milroe. First day of fall camp, Milroe. Open practice that the public could come see. Who was the first quarterback with the first team? Milroe. First scrimmage last week. Who took the first snaps with the first team? Milroe. Who took the first snaps with the first team in the second scrimmage? Milroe. It's obviously the starting quarterback for the Middle Tennessee State game will be Jalen Milroe. It would be almost crazy if it wasn't, but who knows, because Nick Saban's not going to tell us. And there's no way for us to know, not attending practice. But every signal that can be sent says it's Jalen Milroe. And I'm excited about how good he might be a year later. We did see some good things with Jalen at quarterback. And not simply the running. Yes, the running. But believe it or not, folks, he did make some good throws. As a matter of fact, 3 touchdown passes against Texas A&M. That's as many as anybody threw against Texas A&M all last year. They finished the season as the number 1 pass defense in college football. Milroe 3 touchdowns in that game. I think he threw 1 against Arkansas too.
Let me stop you, Jimmy, and ask you something. I don't mean to cut you off, and I was able to get myself off mute. But I'm wondering now let's say Milroe had not started and played against A&M. Let's say Bryce had played that game and he wasn't hurt. Maybe he wasn't as hurt as bad as we thought after Arkansas, and Bryce was able to go against A&M. I wonder if some people's perception of Milroe would be different, because then the lasting image of Milroe would be that long run against Arkansas, And I think the A&M game, first of all, I think what happened was the long run against Arkansas and some of the other, the fact that he was able to, that was a 3rd and 15, if I remember right. So that was also a big moment. They was able to convert that. And he's just such a specimen, and he really can throw a pretty ball. If he doesn't have the A&M game where he does have the interceptions, and remember this, The A&M game is so different last year because we played it at night, which we normally play LSU. It was a revenge game, quote unquote. And then it was Milroe getting to play, not Bryce, right? There was a ton of pressure on this guy because everybody was thinking that, oh, we're just going to go in there and wax A&M. Yesterday, ESPN's doing their top 25 games from last year. A&M versus Appalachian State is on that list. And I'd forgotten, I'd blocked it out that they lost to Appalachian State last year, but I watched it and I was thinking, okay, now I kind of see why some people are disappointed in Alabama's performance against A&M in that game because Appalachian State owned them. I mean, they owned them with a dude, by the way, Cameron Peoples, who went to he's from Clay County. But anyway, and they did it without their leading rusher. So I'm thinking that we had unreasonable expectations about whipping Texas A&M's butt. And when that didn't happen and we had to survive right there at the very end, people look for a scapegoat. And that scapegoat is going to be the quarterback. Now, it wouldn't have been Bryce. Bryce wouldn't have been the scapegoat because he's done a lot that we already know about. But it was a scapegoat this time because we were like, we got to blame it on somebody. Let's blame it on Milroe. And it wasn't Milroe's fault at all. Yes, he had some hiccups. It was his first start, night game, revenge game, CBS, big deal. I think we put too much on him for that. So if that's your lasting image of him and that's what people are worried about his being the starter, I think we need to put those fears to rest and say, hey, y'all, give him another chance. Let him start against Middle Tennessee and let's see what he does. Let's just see how it goes. And if it goes well, then let him grow against Texas. Then he'll grow in the next game, And let's all watch him mature together.
He did make a lot of errors in that game. That's true. He did. I wouldn't say that he played great against A&M at all. I'd say he played fairly poorly because of the turnovers, the 3 turnovers he was responsible for, and it helped keep A&M in the game. A lot of what Luke just said there, exactly right. I think a lot of Alabama fans were really upset because they showed up that night ready for the butt kicking. I mean, the Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban feud. They were ready to go defend Coach Saban's honor and have a joyless murder ball game. And they were ready for it. And they thought because of A&M's performance to date that they weren't a good football team at all. And that Alabama was gonna kill them. And then it didn't happen. And everyone was upset. And I agree 1,000,000%, Luke, that has contributed to the over criticism of Jalen in that game. It was an extreme high pressure game. It's national TV. It's prime time. It's his first start, and he's a redshirt freshman. And here's one other thing, and this is just a fan thing in general. It's not just this game, although this game is a good example of it. We have to learn to distinguish between a player that has earned their spot in the starting lineup versus one that is thrust into the lineup due to injury. And those players should be evaluated differently. Look, we're going to have a starting defense against Middle Tennessee. We know who a lot of those guys are: Kool-Aid, Dallas, Deontay Lawson, Jaheim Otis, Justin Aboigbe, Caleb Downs, Malachi Moore, Chris Braswell. We know who the starters are, right? Because they're the guys who've earned it. They're good players. They're experienced players. And if any of them played poorly in the game, I think it's fair for fans to point it out and say, what the heck is wrong with Dallas Turner? Or, hey, that wasn't a good performance, Braswell, if that's the case. But let's say that 2 days prior to the game that Terrion Arnold gets hurt and they have to play Des Ricks, the cornerback, and Des gives up a few pass receptions. Well, of course he is. He's a freshman, and he's not a regular starter. He's only playing because the starter's hurt, and yet we'll be just as tough on him as they are the Dallas Turners and Kool-Aid McKinstry's and Justin Aboigbe's. And that's just really kind of absurd. And that really was the situation with Milroe last year. I mean, Milroe wasn't out there because he beat out Bryce. He was out there because Bryce was hurt. And we should expect that the redshirt freshman that's only playing because of injury may not go out there and win the Heisman Trophy, in his first start. So that's why I think we're likely to see a different Milroe most of the time than we saw that night. And I'm excited about Jalen, and I'm excited about the kind of season he could have. I also think that because he's still a young player, the nature of college football and what we've seen from Milroe is I'm not going to be surprised if there's more errors than we would like to see, ideally. That's not going to surprise me. But he's also the type of kid that can overcome errors because he's kind of a big play machine. One thing about Jalen Milroe I love about his game is this. When Alabama's on their own 2-yard line and you're backed up and you're like, oh no, this could be really bad, Alabama could score. You're always in scoring position with Milroe because he's got a strong arm and can wing it down the field, and he's got those legs. He can outrun the defensive backs and score from 98 yards out. And that's really exciting and fun, and it's the type of plays that can overcome errors. So I'm excited to see what would happen. I agree that Jalen Milroe is very likely going to be the starter against Middle Tennessee, but I would also agree with this final notion, Luke. I don't know that he has a substantial lead to the point that his leash is going to be very long. I think they won't hesitate to look at other guys. And upon reflection, upon reflection, as you put on the today's itinerary, I'm not convinced that the next quarterback to get the look if they pull Milroe out might be Tyler Buchner, in part because he's a year older than Simpson and certainly more experienced. As a matter of fact, he's more experienced than Milroe. So I think it might be Buchner who probably each practice and each week gets a little more comfortable with his new situation at Alabama.
Jimmy, I need to tell everybody about LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team and helps you find them faster and for free. All you got to do is go to LinkedIn Jobs, add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are indeed hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to ultimately hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to and helps you find them faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions may, and I bet they do, apply. Jimmy, the rest of this week, we're going to be talking, it's really, we're here at it. It's time. It's time to, rubber meets the road or boat meets the water. I don't know.
Whatever. Game week. It's not our game week, but it's game week.
It is
our game this week.
And we'll be talking about that. One of the things that we'll probably keep talking about, and this was rather interesting, the first team offensive line, because we didn't talk about them yesterday, from left to right, was Caden Proctor, Tyler Booker, Seth McLaughlin, Darian Dalcourt, and J.C. Latham. Interesting. And the fact that Caden Proctor is already considered a starter at this moment. Now, again, this is subject to change, but you and I have been talking about it, ever since we signed him. We said he's going to be starting this year. We maybe not game one, but looks like maybe game one.
Game one, I would say all indications. And the signal was this: we didn't need a scrimmage or someone at the scrimmage to tell us anything. All we needed to know that Proctor was starting was the news from the video and photos that Alabama sends out during the week that Tyler Booker had been moved from right guard to left guard. That was all we needed to know, because there's an obvious reason as to why you would do that. And that's when you have an inexperienced tackle, what you want next to him is a guard who is experienced, who has played, because it's not so much the blocking, it's who to block. And that can get really complicated. I've said all along about freshman offensive linemen, Caden Proctor's a big, physical, crazy, talented kid, but who to block is more complicated than getting your guy blocked. So Booker can help it. So as soon as they move Booker to left side, I was like, Proctor's going to be left tackle, because, Pritchett is a slightly older kid, and they didn't feel it necessary to line up an experienced guard next to Elijah Pritchett, who's been in the program over a year and has a better, handle on the scheme, part. But I think that the move of Booker kind of, kind of caused all that. Now, the real interesting part to me, Luke, is it seemed prior to that Terrence Ferguson, TJ or Ferg, as the players call him, he had sort of moved to that first team. Once they've moved Booker over to the left side, it doesn't appear that TJ Ferguson also moved, okay, to the right side. And right now, it just appears that that Dalcourt has a strong grasp on that number one guard spot. He's a real experienced guy. This would be his third consecutive season as the starter in game one. Third season in a row. So that's an experienced kid. I suppose they're going to watch it closely. I don't think the competition's over in terms of I would watch, Ferguson maybe making a move there at some point, maybe even Elijah Pritchett moving inside. I think that's possible. But for now, it's going to be Dalcourt, and I'm a little higher on him than most. He's not only been a staff player of the week a few times, and hardly any of the other linemen have even once, but he's been a few times. He was an SEC offensive lineman of the week once. So experience, pretty good. That's probably the position to keep an eye on if there's going to be a change. But for now, Luke, I agree. Based on all reports, that offensive line looks pretty set.
And I really like that group. I think it's good for the future too. Some young pups on there that are very good. So excited about that.
I think they'll contend to win the Joe Moore Award. I know that's a bold thing to say based on how the offensive line played in 21 and 22. It's a bold thing to say, but I'm really confident about it. Now, notice I said they'll contend. I didn't say they're going to win the Joe Moore. I said they'll contend. Now, Joe Moore Award actually has a semifinalist list and then the finalists. I'm going to predict that they make the finalist list, which I think is about 10. So a national top 10 offensive line, I know we're spoiled and ruined, but national top 10 offensive line is pretty good.
It's pronounced runt, by the way. Jimmy, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk some running back stuff. And we're back. Running backs. Justice Haynes was not able to participate. Okay. I mean, we know what he can do. So I think we're pretty happy with that. Apparently, though, Jam Miller caused some waves. Again, you've been high on Jam Miller since the dawn of time, I think. And you have loved you some Jam Miller. And he made a nice catch, apparently, for about a 25-ish yard gain.
On the video, I think the Alabama put out a video, and I think a part of that is on the video.
Yeah. So you love to see a running back with good hands out there that also runs hard between the tackles. Now, he has dealt with a thigh bruise. He's dealt with some other injuries in the past. We're not intimating that he's injury prone or anything like that, but he's getting into the realm of where you start calling somebody injury prone. I'm not saying he is. Please understand. What I'm saying is after you have so many injuries in a row that keep you from doing things, you start to get a little worried. And again, it's unexplainable. There's no way to really deal with that. When people say, well, he's so injury prone. I mean, it's really kind of like Tua in a way. I mean, yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, Tua's first pass in his preseason game against the Texans was almost a pick six. He threw an interception, and the guy got down to the 6-yard line or whatever, and Tua took a shot. I'm like, he takes a shot when he doesn't need to take any shot, and it's not his fault. It's just sometimes people are like that. I hope Jam Miller is not. I hope it's not his fate because I love his potential. He came out with the ones apparently too, which is interesting because yesterday I had seen a report that Roydell Williams was with the ones. I mean, I guess essentially they probably both kind of were like 1A, 1B. And I guess Jace didn't play. And then Justice Haynes didn't play, right?
I think Jace. I haven't heard that Jace missed the scrimmage.
Okay,
I think Jace was out there, but I did.
Well, I've seen no report about it.
Somebody say Roydell took the first snap. That's a little bit of a surprise, but not really. Roydell is a good player. Jace is a good player. My concern, not a concern. It's not a concern. I'm talking about fan perception and fan complaints. I think there's going to be some because I think fans are excited about Jam Miller and Justice Haynes because they're sort of the shiny new toys, and they've seen a lot of Roydell and they've seen a lot of Jace. And it's true, they're not Najee Harris, they're not Trent Richardson, they're not Josh Jacobs. So, and since they're not those things, it's like, okay, let's go with Justice and Jam. Roydell's a good player. He's a good physical, good fit in what we want to do now in terms of being a more physical offense, run the football. Jace is a good player. Look, the last problem this team is going to have is the running back position. And while I personally believe that Jam Miller is going to be the best running back on this team, I personally believe that, there will never be, I will swear now, I will take an oath right now, Luke, not one time this season will I complain about the running back that's in the game. And I'm not going to say, oh, we should have gone with Jam there. We should have gone with Justice there. Roydell's a good player. Jace is a good player. Alabama is going to put nothing but good players on the field at running back. Now, the good news is we have some depth there because, as Luke already pointed out, Justice Haynes missed the scrimmage yesterday. Reports that Richard Young got banged up in the scrimmage. That just leaves you with 3. That could happen at running back fast. And boy, you have 5, and then you blink, and then you only have 2 or 3. So hopefully they'll all play. They'll all get experience. I suspect we're going to see all 5 quite a bit over the course of the season. Hopefully it won't be due to injury. But running back's position, I don't worry about it. I've noticed when the media asked Nick Saban about the running backs, he almost smirks. I mean, Nick just doesn't worry about that position at all, and he doesn't worry about any of the guys that play back there. I think Nick Saban is very high on Roydell, Jace, Jam, and Justice, and, Richard Young, who's still learning, but I think he's going to play.
Did he get hurt yesterday just a little?
Yeah, like a nicked up thing. I think he's fine.
And Caleb Downs, apparently some people were worried about him with a potential injury, but I think everything's okay.
Coach Saban specifically said no one was. I think Coach Saban hasn't let it. No one got hurt. I think players got banged up.
Yeah. Are you injured or you're hurt?
Yeah, there's a difference between being banged up and injured. To my knowledge, no one got injured. Several players got banged up.
Okay. Well, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We will be back tomorrow. We'll probably still be talking about this scrimmage as news continues to trickle out. We'll be talking about practice coming up. They're
game week.
It's game week, essentially.
Game week.
And they don't practice.
A couple of announcements coming up very soon, too. Daniel Hill and Edric Houston. And we'll see. We'll see on both.
Houston's Tuesday, right?
I know it's this week. I know it's this week. And that's big. I mean, that's big. I'm not predicting Alabama right now. I guess gun to my head, I'm going to say Ohio State, gun to my head. But thankfully, there's not one to my head, and I don't have to bet on this because that could be Alabama. And if so, it's an earthquake. It's an earthquake. I mean, that would be a shot in the arm, to say the least, at that position and that dude. That would be big, and it could happen.
All right. We'll talk about it. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.